Hey guys, I've just got a good friend here. He's told me a true story about the Illuminati before. If you're not sure who the Illuminati is, they're basically a cult linked to the idea of New World Order, an alleged underground totalitarian global government that conspiracy theorists believe is controlling the world. Kind of like the stonecutters on The Simpsons.
Hey, how come you guys got such great parking places?
It's a secret.
Shut up.
Here's a little video of Jim Carrey kind of joking about them.
For years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms have been hired by the government to throw you off the track, to distract you, to make you laugh and stuff like that, make you happy and docile so you don't know what's really going on.
Now that you know who they are, let's get into it. And he wants to remain anonymous because he's worried that I guess they could come after him. So we're just going to have him blurt out and we're just going to let him go. So, yeah, if you just want to tell us the story from the start, let's go for it.
I don't know how worried I am. I suppose it's just part and parcel of speaking about anything
Yeah, that's true.
of this nature that you probably want to keep your identity.
I should probably say if I go missing or anything happens to me, suicide, I'm a very happy guy. If something happens to me, assume it's under suspicious circumstances. A suspicious context, yeah.
Alright, you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Okay. Alright, so I'm working at a car dealership and I'm on the books with a particular car dealership.
Yep.
And then the reason that I was at that car dealership sort of dried up, but I found that nobody really noticed that I wasn't really needed anymore, and so I
What
kept
were you
showing
doing
up
there?
to this place. Well, I was covering for someone initially
Yep.
who wasn't there, and then they came back and they were on light duties, and then it kind of got a little bit, it was a little bit blurry about whether or not it was still required. And so I just kind of capitalized on that and kept showing up
Yep.
to this place. And then one of the guys that was working at this place was like, why don't you come over to, we'll call it Mazda. Why don't you come over to Mazda in the mornings before, at like 6:30 or whatever,
Yep.
and open the cars with me. It's like an full extra hour of overtime. So I started doing this with this guy. I'd show up really early at this other dealership. I opened the cars with him because the two dealerships were under the same sort of payroll system. So I was still getting paid for doing that.
Yep.
So I'm over there. I did this for a while, and there was this Thai guy there named Karavi.
Is that a fake name?
Hey? Yeah, that's a fake name.
Karavi?
Karavi. He was a bright sort of character, a really interesting sort of character, and so he used to kind of touch base with us in the morning when we're opening the cars and whatever. And then, I really liked this guy. We kind of hit it off. We had a kind of a spark or whatever. So I ended up kind of chatting to him a fair bit, and he said, "Listen, if you're, if they don't even know if you're coming or going over there, why don't you just show up here and you can work for me, and they can keep paying you, you're working for me."
Yep.
And so I did that. I was like, right. So I started showing up in Mazda every morning and working for this guy who was a hotshot salesman selling 40 cars a month. And this kind of real sanguine character, like really sort of on fire type character. And I ended up his kind of personal assistant. Like that was basically my job. I was just kind of running around after him, doing errands for him, going to get his lunch, swapping his Tinder for him and this sort of thing, like just like a proper PA position.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty important position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surely. So we hit it off pretty good. I worked for him for maybe 2 months or just less than that. And got to know him pretty good over the time. It was, we didn't have much in common really, but I don't know, we both liked laughing or whatever, and so we just kind of make it to the laugh or whatever, and so it was pretty cool sort of thing to be doing. This guy was interesting. He also wasn't on any drugs, which was interesting. I got out of him that he wasn't actually on any, coke or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Which is pretty common amongst car salesmen.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Sanguine and on fire and all that kind of stuff they get it from. But he wasn't doing that. He was just like drifting off life or whatever. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, high energy guy.
So anyway, worked for him for a while under the radar on the payroll, sort of dodgily. So let me get this story right. So what happened? So, all right, so he has this boss. His boss is a total asshole, right? Like this guy was a total asshole. He was this huge orange guy, really furious or whatever.
Yep.
And this guy was a prick, and he used to shout at all the yardies and whatever. He was clearly a jerk, and he played it up real nice with Karabi, like he was. Because Karabi was selling all these cars. Karabi was selling an insane amount of cars, like 40 plus cars a month, which is a lot.
Yeah, more than one a day. Yeah.
Yeah, straight up. And and so I was just kind of over there, kind of hanging out with Karabi, and generally dodging this other guy who was clearly a fuckwit, and didn't really want me around, and he was a jerk.
Yep.
And so, after about 2 months, I noticed this change in Karabi, like his whole mood shifted a lot, right? And so did the mood of his boss. And their relationship started looking really strained. And Karabi lost his kind of pop, right? Yep. And so I'd show up and he'd be fairly miserable, or at least compared to how he was.
Yeah.
For like a couple of days it was like this. And then he takes me, I'm out in the yard one morning, and he comes up in the yard and he points out this sticker that's on one of the cars. And this sticker was for a, like a workshop or something around my city. And it had this triangle as its symbol and a couple of other things inside it. And Karabi comes up and he goes, if you see this on any cars, take this off, get rid of it immediately. And I'm like, okay, why is that? And he goes, because this, what this is? This is the Illuminati, what this is. And, I know what the Illuminati is, obviously. I'm a theorist, conspiracy theorist sort of guy, so I went through, just like you probably did, I went through all of the cool videos or whatever years ago, just kind of mined YouTube for information about stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I knew about them and about their symbols and everything.
Yep, and I know the one you're talking about. I've actually gone on their website and seen their symbol, and it does look a lot Illuminati affiliate.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it did glow with that vibe for sure.
Yeah.
But still, I kind of just had it in my head that Crow was just trying to be weird, paranoid, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I would think too.
Yeah, plus another interesting thing was that he didn't seem so familiar with the Illuminati. Like he was telling me, like when he told me it's the Illuminati, it was like I'd never heard the term before, and he was teaching me something or whatever. And yeah, he was kind of pointing out the triangle, and he was telling, the classic old, Illuminati symbol with the eye pyramid and all this kind of stuff. He's telling me about this symbol like I would have never seen it before, and I'm like, this is interesting. Where's this coming from? And so I started taking these stickers off these cars. It was pretty popular car workshop, so it's on, every fourth or fifth car that comes into the place, every, to be traded or whatever. So
yeah.
So so I started taking these stickers off or whatever, and then and he's fairly miserable and fairly grumpy at this point. Like his whole demeanor has changed and stuff, and he looks like a nervous sort of character. He doesn't look like he's having much fun at all.
Yep.
And so we're over there one day, a couple of days after this has sort of happened, and he says, I need you to come with me. I need to show you something. And he walks me out to the dealership and around the blocks, a couple of blocks away from where the dealership was. And we come up upon this building which is called the Church of Christ the Scientist. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like one of these offshoot Christian type churches,
Yep.
This one was called the Church of Christ the Scientist, and it has this big sign out the front of the thing. And Karabi comes up and he shows me this. He goes, "Look, it says, look, this is the Church of the Satanists." Church of Christ the Satanist. And I'm looking at the sign, I'm thinking, look, that says scientist. And and Karavi seems convinced that it says Satanist. And so at that point, I think, all right, he's like, he's kind of paranoid and fucked up. And
something's going on
over this. Yeah. So I kind of just nod as he's, telling me this is, another Illuminati trip. This is like the Satanists and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of listening to it with a grain of salt, just thinking, this guy's maybe losing his shit a bit. And so on the way back from that, because I didn't point it out, I just sort of said, yeah, well, man, like, the Satanists or whatever, I didn't point out that he'd kind of misread this in a seemingly really obvious sort of way. He'd misread this.
Yep.
And so we're walking back, and I hit him up, and I say, what's going on with you, man? Like, you're clearly very different to how you were last week. Something's gone down. And, I'd noticed by this stage that his boss was, like, angry with him, shouting at him in the yard and stuff like this. And which was really different because the vibe before that, his boss was like buttering him up.
Yep.
I mean, he was a hotshot salesman, man. I mean, no one sells that many cars a month.
Yep.
It was a big deal. He was up on a big sign at the front of Mazda on a big screen, his face, and a slogan that was like, "Come on in and see Karavi," like that. He was kind of being pushed as a type of a local salesman celebrity type deal.
Yep.
And then, and his boss was just kind of buttering him every morning in this greasy sort of way. It was really awful. But now his boss was really clearly not as happy with him at all. It was something was going down. So I hit him up, and I'm like, as we're walking back, I'm like, what's going on? And so he tells me the story, man. Here's the story, right? So he tells me, like, in Sydney, he's a fairly successful salesman, right? He's selling maybe 25 cars a day or whatever. 25 cars a month. And he's getting a bit of a name for himself doing that, just kind of steadily selling us a pretty good amount of cars. And so he gets offered this job in our city, right? As, sales manager or whatever of Mazda.
Yep.
And so he takes it. And what happens? So yeah, he works it for a while, and he's doing pretty good, the same as he was out there. And then one day, this SUV shows up in his yard, black SUV. And this is him telling me the story or whatever. He's like, I think this is good, like this looks like a decent trade or whatever. And he goes out there prepared to sort of talk to these guys about trading this SUV or whatever they want to do.
Yep. And
these guys get out, and these guys in suits get out. They're all wearing the same ring, he said. All wearing the same ring. And they're like, oh, can we chat to you in your office for a bit? And so they go into Karavi's office with him. And they say, we're from a club or a society or something like that, and it's a club for successful people. It's a club for successful business people doing successful things, and we're considering inviting you to join this club. And we can help you. We can help you a lot with what you're doing or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to let you go for a few months. We're going to kind of just see how you go for a few months here. And then we'll come back and we'll have a chat about this thing. And so Karavi's like, oh, okay, or whatever. He was fairly impressed with the guy, clearly.
Yep.
And so these guys leave. And then Karavi said that over the next couple of months, his sales went bananas. They pushed up past 40 or whatever. His average was up past 40 a month or whatever.
Yep.
And he also said that in every facet of his life, he suddenly had this incredible magical luck. He said just with like strange little petty things, like, like if you're cooking and you need 150 mils of something, he'd just kind of splash liquid around and there would be a perfect 150 mils. He said, his mates would buy him a drink at just the right time and all this kind of stuff like that. He was just amazed that he was having all of this bizarre luck in his life, not to mention the fact that he's at work. He was just off the charts. He was selling so many cars he didn't know what to do. Everyone who walked in wanted a car. Yeah. He was selling cars that made him a lot of commission as well. They were like really good sales.
Yeah. And didn't you tell me the first time too that he started getting girls everywhere he went as well?
Yeah, that's another thing. He was a fairly randy sort of guy. He was right into women, and he couldn't. He said he was just batting off all of these women suddenly, like they were just all over him.
Yeah. His life was just going good in every way it could.
Yeah, and all of a sudden just went completely awesome. And his boss obviously was just, buttering him up completely at this stage, putting him up on the screen and all this kind of stuff, and making him into this sort of celebrity sales guy.
Yeah.
And so this is when I started working for him too, just after this went down. So when I showed up there, that was when he was like popping. He was tripping off the fact that he was suddenly doing so well. And I worked for him for maybe like a month and a half, 2 months. And over that period, that was the period when he was doing really, really well. And so yeah, he's doing really good. And then so one day this SUV showed up again after 2 months or whatever.
Yep. And this was while you were working there?
Yeah. I didn't see them show up. I was doing something this day or whatever. I was out. I used to just kind of do runs around town or whatever for him. I wasn't there when they showed up. But these guys show up again, and they're like, "You're great. You've done great. You've done it. You're in the club. You're in our society. Well done. We're really impressed with how you're going and everything like this. It's really good. And here's my card." They give him a card and they say, "So what we're going to do now is, in a couple of days, you come into Sydney and meet our leader, the Grand Dragon." Right? This is the term they use.
Grand Dragon.
You can meet the Grand Dragon and be admitted into the society, and we can help you. Right? There was this real press that he was going to benefit a lot from being in this thing.
Yep.
And he already had a clue that there was something strange about what was going on, and that all of his amazing luck was somehow connected to this thing. He wasn't he didn't believe in magic, this guy.
Yeah.
But he was kind of open to, he also wasn't like a total science head or whatever. He was clearly just sort of flirting with the idea that there was some kind of magical thing going on where he got all this luck and stuff somehow connected to these guys.
Yep.
And so he was like, great, I'll be there, no problem. He takes their card or whatever, and he's stoked. And so he drives to Sydney that night to get all his mates to the pub to tell them and celebrate this thing. And so he does that, and he gets all his mates to the pub, and he says, "Oh, this great thing's happened to me. I'm selling cars like you wouldn't believe, and I've got these guys. They're going to put me in their club." And explains what the guy had said, that he's going to meet the Grand Dragon or whatever, right?
Yep.
So one of Karavi's mates is cluey to the Illuminati thing, quite cluey. It's clearly a conspiracy theorist or something. He's right into it.
Yep.
And he says to Karavi, "That's the Illuminati, man." He goes, "They're goat fuckers." This is the term he uses, right? Because they're goat fuckers. Right? And so Karavi's mate tells Karavi this story of some friend of a friend's dad or something like this, some kind of loose connection, had the same thing happen. He was working in some kind of business related, I don't know, some kind of sales type related thing, and was approached by a similar sort of thing, and was told to come and meet the Grand Dragon, and did so, and went and did their meeting. And he said that this guy was told, the first thing he was told when he got to the meeting was to take all his gear off, to strip. And this guy didn't do that. He said, "No, I don't want to do that," and got ejected from the place for not taking all his clothes off in front of a bunch of clothed people, right? And then this guy had apparently gone missing, this guy had wound up dead. Like a short while later, he'd driven his car off an embankment or some kind of scenario like this, some kind of, easily.
Hard to prove that it was kind of like the Epstein thing.
Yeah, that's right. And had gone missing or whatever. And so Karavi's mate's telling Karavi this story, and Karavi becomes convinced of this story and freaks out, right?
Yeah.
Freaks out about the whole thing. And so he drunkenly, at the end of that night, he drunkenly texts the number on the card, and he says, "Oh, I'm not into this. I don't want this. I don't want to be in your club."
Yep.
On this text, right? And so then he drives home or whatever, and then a couple of days later or the next day or whatever, he's in the Mazda dealership, and another SUV shows up.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and because he didn't hear about anything back over the phone from these guys, and another SUV shows up, and a whole bunch of old women get out of this SUV, and the old women ask to meet him, talk to him in his office or whatever, and so he goes into the office, and they say, "Listen, we've gotten your message, and we just just encourage you to change your mind and to come along to the meeting." Karavi's really nervous by this point, and he's like, "No, I don't want to do that." And they're like, "Well, you kind of have to, because we've already invested in you. We've already made an investment in you, and you kind of owe us now, so you need to show up to this thing."
Holy shit.
Yeah, he gets the shits at this point, and he says, "Look, I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for you to invest in me or whatever. I just no interest, thanks. Just go away."
Yeah.
And sends these ladies out. They didn't leave easy. Like, they're very stern and steely about the whole thing. And eventually they left. And Karavi said his sales just plummeted at that point, right? Yeah, okay, so for a short while afterwards, he couldn't sell a car. And not only that, but the magical luck completely left him and was replaced by incredible bad luck, right? So every time something could go wrong, it did suddenly.
Yeah, Murphy's Law.
Yeah, that's right. So his mood completely dumps, and his relationship with his boss completely dumps. And I'd seen this happen. This was when the shift that had happened, this change in him. And so then this is him still telling me this story when we're walking back from this Church of Christ the Scientist or whatever. And he goes, now I'm seeing these symbols everywhere, and he was clearly afraid of it, and he was quite terrified of it. He's saying, "I can't stop seeing these symbols, like these, the pyramid, all this kind of stuff, all the triangles or whatever. It just kind of feels like it's closing in on me." And he's clearly quite paranoid at this point. And so now I make sense of the behaviour coming and showing me the Church of Christ the Satanist or whatever, that seems like really paranoid, misreading, this sort of thing. And so he's telling me this, and then and he says, "So yeah, I'm really miserable. I don't know what to do." And I'm really scared. And I'm like, "Oh, that's really screwed up," and whatever. And then for a couple of days after that, it was the same sort of vibe. He didn't really feel, he wasn't really coming across in any kind of healthy sort of way. And yeah, he gets the sack. He suddenly gets the sack. Suddenly, it was like on the Friday of that week, he show up and there's no Karavi. And his sign's been taken down from the top of the thing or whatever. He's just suddenly gone. And I texted him, got no response. I checked his Facebook, and his Facebook's gone. No Facebook. We used to throw messages back and forth from Facebook, and that's gone. And his boss, who hated me the whole time and was a huge asshole, kind of ignored me for a few days and then gave me the sack, and then I got the sack.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And so I went back to other dealerships or whatever, just kind of scouting for more work, and asking people, like, what happened to Karavi? And everyone was like, nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. A lot of people just kind of assumed he went back to Thailand, because he was talking about doing that at the end of it. He just kind of constantly saying, "I just want to go home. I just want to go back to Thailand." And so, yeah, that's kind of like where it leads. That's kind of like where I leave the story.
So you haven't spoken to him since?
No, and I have no way of doing so.
Have you looked, like, since then?
Well, I mean, I dug his Facebook, and I kind of looked around at people I thought might be connected to him, but no, I couldn't find anything. Like, this guy just fully just disappeared.
Wow. What do you personally think happened?
Well, no, I suppose the two scenarios I've got in my head is that either he did just do that, he just kind of got paranoid and scared about the whole thing and just kind of threw it all in and flew back to Thailand, or he drove off an embankment or whatever. But if that was the case, you'd think that somebody would have heard about it or something like this, or I don't know, there would have been some kind of rumor around about the fact that he'd been dispatched, but
Yeah.
nobody heard anything.
Well, yeah, maybe he just went back to Thailand.
Maybe he drove his car off it and back.
Yeah, that's a strange story, man. It gets you thinking, hey.
It does. And I suppose the thing about it that's like most interesting is the this concept of a magical luck. That's a strange thing, and it's clearly what the old ladies were referring to when they talked about the investment.
Right. I thought there could have been like, they could have been paying people to make sure, like, picking up girls. They could have been in some way prostitutes, and
Yeah, sure. I suppose that's one idea, is that they could have been faking the whole thing.
Yeah, and even with his car sales, maybe if they're that rich, they could have just been influencing people to buy from him or whatnot.
Yeah. I suppose that went through my head as well. But the other scenario that went through my head is if they did have some way of kind of increasing one's general profitability in the world, like someone, if they did have a type of luck that they could apply, like a certain sort of commodity that they could apply to somebody, and it would bring them luck. It would sort of bring the gravity of luck to their situation. That would make sense with what they were talking about.
Yeah, sure.
Because also, I mean, it wouldn't do them much good to kind of fake a successful business person and then let them into the club for being successful. More likely, it was a situation where they kind of infused him with their power, their kind of luck, their money, some kind of spirit money. They put it in him to see if he vibed with it and turned it into a successful situation, instead of perhaps, I suppose, just kind of making an ass of himself or not vibing with the energy, and it wouldn't work. Clearly it did with this guy Karavi. Like, it clearly worked a charm. He became a successful guy very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's the vibe I got, is that what they were talking about when they said we've already invested in you, was that we've already kind of used our powers to enhance your life.
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at, yeah.
And so that's why you owe us.
Right, it's an interesting take.
Mm.
You know how people say, like, if you concentrate on something, it's often what you'll notice. So maybe he was under the impression he was going to inherit good luck, so he started noticing things that he wouldn't have noticed before, almost like a placebo.
Yeah, sure.
To a certain degree. I mean, it can't explain everything.
Are you talking more about him noticing things like the stickers, or
like the small things, like there's small things that seem to be good luck. Maybe he was under the impression things were going to work out for him, so he started noticing lucky things that he wouldn't have paid attention to before.
Yes, possibly. And possibly both scenarios are happening. Possibly this type of magical luck, or whatever it was, kind of does play off of that placebo effect and does play into the mechanisms of the mind like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like, Karavi, he was like a simple sort of guy.
Wasn't superstitious. Wouldn't believe.
Wasn't superstitious. That's right. He didn't have any reason to kind of go into wild theories very quickly, and he was fairly genuine too, especially for a sales guy. He was like a fairly genuine sort of guy. So he was coming across as being fairly genuine. And when he was talking about this luck stuff, I could really tell that it was massively conspicuous in his life that it was happening.
Yeah.
Because I considered that too. I just kind of thought, well, if you have a bunch of guys telling you that you're going to be successful, maybe you would just start noticing common things that were already sort of happening.
Yeah.
But you kind of notice them more and attribute them to the scenario and all this kind of stuff. I'm sure that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe not either. Like, I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know, the way that he was coming across and talking about the girls and all this kind of stuff, it really did seem like it was massively conspicuous in his life.
Well, there's definitely some strange actions going on there. It's creepy as.
Yeah, it's creepy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just the fact that he kind of dropped all of these, really common Illuminati type of ideas without any kind of prior knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even just like the same, they're all wearing the same ring, like that. That's an old sort of Illuminati concept. That he told me like it was a fresh idea, sort of thing like this. That type of genuineness, that naivety, really kind of played into how believable his unbelievable story was. Just mean, it'd be a different story if somebody who was really familiar with the whole thing was going, "Oh man, they were totally."
Yeah, and the motive to doing it would be to try and put the spotlight on them, but it's different with this. You watched him slowly freak out over time.
That's right.
Yeah, and I guess it's harder hearing it through second person and then third person because it's like I trust you, but then people that might be watching don't even necessarily trust me, and then they have to trust someone who I know, and then someone that and it's like there's 5 degrees of trust in that.
Yeah, surely.
But
Surely. The other thing, just quickly, is
yeah, yeah,
when he's telling me when he was telling me the story, he was already in his kind of upset sort of state, and when he was talking about the symbols, like he couldn't stop seeing the symbols. He looked genuinely quite afraid of that.
yeah,
Clearly, like things were popping out at him constantly. There was, I think probably whatever the antithesis is of the magical lock was coming in on him. Um, or at least he was kind of spun out by the original magic feeling of the whole thing, and then turned that into some kind of, vortex into hell for himself, where he couldn't stop seeing the symbols, he couldn't stop worrying, he was just seeing stuff popping up everywhere in relation to kind of evil things. For example, nobody really connects the Illuminati necessarily directly to the concept of Satanism. That's not necessarily something that people connect.
no, it's not exclusively.
Not exclusively, but he'd done that clearly because he was just kind of afraid of evil. He'd become afraid of the concept of evil society. And so, when he drove past that church, scientist church, he saw Satanists because he was really paranoid and worried about the concept of any kind of dark thing. And so the walls were really kind of closing in on him.
Yeah, I understand. What do you think when he was talking about that church being Satanist? Do you think he was onto something, or do you think he was just starting to get scared and lose it?
No, I just think it's some kind of offshoot church, sciencey based Christ church, and that he was his mind had misread it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he was just kind of finding whatever he was afraid of wherever he went, which is the classic paranoid behavior. It's classic, insane paranoid behavior.
Yeah.
Where, when you see what you're worried about everywhere.
Yeah, it's creepy. It's so creepy.
No, it's a strange story, isn't it?
I'd love to be able to talk to him about it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anyone's spoken to him since.
Yeah.
But I mean, lucky that he came across this mate who had heard this story, I suppose, because he was all prepped to just kind of dive right into whatever they had going for him.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe he was the type of guy to just take his gear off and just kind of give himself over to this strange group, just because, I mean, clearly that's what they do. I mean, it's a classic bait type scenario.
Yeah,
They fill your life full of magical joy. They get you attached over a couple of months to the concept that you're a flash guy who's got a magical lock, with the hope that you would then just kind of do anything to keep that. You would never want to go back to your normal life or whatever. And so then if you show up at some meeting and some panel of guys in robes tells you to take all your gear off, you just kind of do it because the worst thing you can imagine is that you get ejected from the thing.
Well,
so obviously this guy's mate or whatever had done the better thing, which was to say, no, I don't want to just completely degrade myself in order to keep some sort of idea, and you walked out and wound up dead.
Yeah. Well, I guess that getting naked thing's just kind of like the first test to see like if you're willing to do something that doesn't make sense just because they tell you to do it.
Yeah.
And that's,
well, I suppose, if it was a loving organization, that's what they'd do. They'd wait until you started unbuckling your belt, and then they'd say, what are you doing? Why should we respect you if you're prepared to just kind of debase yourself? But obviously that's not their vibe, because this guy had refused.
Yeah.
And he'd been ejected from the place. So clearly there wasn't an organization that was interested in actually in the well-being of its new recruits. It was instead interested in recruits that were prepared to kind of sell out.
Yep. So where do we go from here as far as the Illuminati? Like, what do you think their end goal is? And like, I guess, do you think they're everywhere? Do you think it's I don't know. What's your thoughts?
They never said the word Illuminati to Karavi. Like that was what his mate said, and obviously you also come to the same conclusion, just because I know that you've looked at all that sort of theorist stuff, and so you'd come to the same conclusion. But I mean, when we talk about this idea of the Illuminati, I mean, what are we really talking about? Is it one entity, or is it just a type of operation that exists in a couple of different ways in every city, and generally they follow the same sort of pattern of behaviors and stuff. And so whenever anybody sees it, they just assume it's the Illuminati, like it's one big umbrella term that covers a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think probably more likely it's just you just get particular operations that maybe families and all this kind of stuff. People,
just like cults.
What's that?
Just like a cult.
Cults, yeah, I suppose. Or just like, knowledge is power, man. And if you've got some sort of knowledge that exceeds the general knowledge of the population, like if you, for example, know how to somehow distill luck and dispense it at will where you want and change things like that, something that's magical, something that maybe, I mean, everything's just science in the end,
Yeah.
Like the original metal workers that were making metal in the hills or whatever, the villagers thought that they were magicians.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of thing. But nowadays, obviously, we just know it's just science. It's just metal work. It's the same sort of thing, I imagine. If you can take our concept of whatever luck is and you can distill that somehow and make a substance out of it that you can then apply in different places, we would call that some magic. You and I would just have to call it magic because we don't understand the science of it, but it'd just be a science behind it. And so if you've got that, if somehow you've come into that sort of understanding of how to do that, one thing to do, I suppose, is to hit the town with it and say, look what I've done, and try to change the world with it and say, look, I can do this. Or you keep it secret, your ability to do that, and you pass it down in your family and stuff. And your family becomes, your great-great-grandchildren get born into a family where they're told, we're different. We have powers that the normal people don't have, and so you get these societies develop, these sort of secret societies probably based around family and stuff like that take in people they think are going to make money for them and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I imagine it's...
You've given me a lot to think about. That's cool. Like, it would explain a lot too, which is frighteningly unsettling. Like, if you think about all the people who have become super successful and a lot of people coming from underdog stories and their chances of doing that are like 1 in a billion, and then like it just seems that everything goes right for them, and it's like, was there an external factor to their success?
Straight up, interesting, hey? And one thing I noticed about Ferrari was that when I first got there and he was like copper and just fully on fire, he just didn't look like he had to try to be cool. Like he came across really cool.
Yeah.
And just in his behavior and his mannerisms and stuff like that, So kind of, I know this sounds weird, but like every time he kind of just sat down and put his hands together and all that kind of stuff, it just looked like he had this certain sort of presence about him, like a real presence. And that left him when stuff went south for him. That wasn't there anymore. Suddenly he just kind of looked like any old awkward guy. And so I got to wondering whether or not this supposed, this sort of magical luck, this is kind of like a behavioral, what's a good word for it? Just kind of some kind of something that you could kind of like sink in, like a groove. That's, they could provide you with a certain sort of groove, which if you just kind of sit in the groove, anything you do is kind of enhanced. God power, I suppose,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
God with a small g, not a big G. Maybe like a sort of a type of analogous to physical, like a psychic physical, some kind of groove that you can kind of get in, where you're kind of borrowing from the cool of something else, and you don't even necessarily realize it. You're just kind of getting by and feel super cool.
But you have to sell your soul to get in there.
But you have to sell your soul to get in there in a certain sort of way. That's right. And what that made me think of is like these celebrities and stuff.
Yeah, that's straight what I went to when you were bringing up all that. Yeah.
That's what they've got. That's when like you just said, they come from fairly humble beginnings usually.
Yeah.
From the hood or whatever. And but then when they're when they're on TV or whatever, they look like they don't have to try very hard to be awesome.
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like it almost like the awesomeness is somehow external to them, and it's just something that they kind of fall into and stuff like that. And I suppose that brings the game of that, I suppose, would be to not lose yourself, to remember who you are, to kind of relate lovingly to your own fallibility, and not always go with just what is awesome, because you'll be denying your true self, which maybe isn't quite so awesome, but is more genuine and is more you, you know? So I suppose if you encounter one of these sort of situations that try to make you super successful and stuff like that, if you were going to go with it, I suppose the game would be to utilize the power in as much as it was assisting you, but not give over to it completely and just forget who you were initially and become, you know, a husk wrapped around this type of, you know, don't make a husk out of yourself by just kind of falling into this otherworldly awesomeness power. Because what could happen is that could just be taken from you.
Yeah.
And if you spent 10 years completely
relying on it,
then your actual being would have been neglected for that long.
And then to go back to that would just be like starting from scratch.
It would be like, back to kind of, you know, you'd lose all of your original genuineness, which is worth 1,000 times more than some kind of weird plastic fake thing that can be dropped on you and then taken off you in an instant.
Wow.
You know? So I imagine like all these, you know, these sort of celebrities and stuff that are wrapped up with this.
Not everyone who's successful.
Well, not everyone, but notice how there's a certain trend for a lot of them to lose their shit at some point.
Yeah.
And start, you know, freaking out, getting paranoid or whatever, and putting secret, you know, the idea is they put stuff in their lyrics that allude to it and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Would be almost like, you know, their true self under this facade of awesomeness, their true self just kind of trying to push through and just trying to find themselves again, and starving for that genuineness. Starving just to feel like yourself, even if you're not super awesome.
Well, Jim Carrey talks a lot about that. I don't know if you've seen him, and he's called out the Illuminati specifically.
Right.
And he said that he was playing an actor when he goes, I can't remember the exact analogy. It's talking about like what Jack? What's that? Is it the Wizard of Oz? There was that sweaty guy behind the curtain. And he said he's trying to be like this big fake voice when really he's just like the sweaty guy behind the curtain.
I was depressed when I was trying to be the Wizard of Oz instead of the sweaty guy behind the curtain. Everybody walks around and they go like, why am I depressed? Well, it's because you're trying to be something for the world, you know? And as soon as you let that go, better things happen.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this story, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be trying to do more podcasts and more stories, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.
I don't wanna know why.